Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. I probably should have done a video like this a little bit closer to when the Wild Resurgence ban list was actually revealed to us. But today I want to go over 10 decks you should consider playing competitively when the Wild Resurgence ban list does take effect. Obviously, that ban list shakes things up competitively pretty dramatically. So I want to go over some decks you guys should consider, whether they're in the same color as the deck you're playing and you want to just like move staples over, or you're looking for a new deck of the same play style and you want to just like adjust to that now that your deck like Gogeta, Sin, or Gamma is no longer playable, right? So that being said, if you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to buy into the cards you see in today's video, or any trading cards for that matter, it does greatly help me out if you were to use my link in the description to TCG Player. I just get a small kickback from it. Doesn't cost you anything extra, and it really does help out. I really do appreciate it. Anyways, we will get started. Now, of course, the players who took the biggest hit from the set 21 ban list are the red players. So we'll start with red. You can see here, obviously on the screen, we have the Pan leader. Now, all I did for this was go to DBS Deck Planet and just look at the deck database, which you see in the upper left-hand corner here. You can click on that, and you can see any of the public decks that people are building that they choose to make public. So if you're ever looking for like a shell or just like an outline of what a deck should probably look like, you can go in and look at that. It's a pretty helpful resource. That's all I did here for this Pan profile. So Pan is what I do think is probably going to be everyone's go-to red leader now that Sin and Gogeta are banned. Why do I think that? Well, this leader was still putting up some numbers while those two decks were in their competitive limelight. It still managed to top a national tournament even while Sin and Gogeta were at nearly their full power. So I think for that reason, Pan is going to be the one that a lot of red players gravitate towards. And the great thing is a lot of your staples are going to be transferable. So you've got like King Vegeta's Imposing Presence as one example. You've got your various different SCRs you might be playing in your respective red decks. You've also got Gohan defeating the Demon, which is a great card to play at 3 to 4 copies. I don't think you need a full 4 copies in Pan personally, because it's got the problem of having unique where you can't play a ton of them out super frequently, as well as like Pan definitely generating Z energy a little bit slower than Sin and Gogeta, so it's not going to be live as early. I do think 3 copies of this is totally passable in Pan, where you'll save just a little bit of money there. One card this list does not have in particular is the Broly Champ Pack promo, which is understandable if this is a more casual list because that card is a bit more expensive. But at the full competitive height of this leader, you're going to probably want 4 copies of that, because a 1-cost 30k critical that also draws you a card is definitely a bit too good to pass up on, again, competitively speaking. But yeah, I do think this is going to be the go-to red leader. It's definitely a very aggressive red leader, and the one cool thing about it is, or multiple cool things about it, is that it's got free play and it's got a lot of really neat built-in archetype stuff. Like, you got the energy generation with Goku Senses Return and Pan Wisher of Miracles. You've got the overpowered ability to buff the SS4 Goku Defender of Life to a 40k dual attacking double strike that is also going to burn your opponent's life on play. That's a really powerful thing the deck has going for it. So I do think it's a much more fair red deck, of course, but I do think it's going to be quite possibly the best red deck. However, one other red deck that people might currently be sleeping on is Android 13. This is a deck that I put quite a bit of time into upon initial release because I thought what it was doing was very, very cool. However, of course, like the rest of the red decks in existence, it paled in comparison to Sin and Gogeta. However, now that those decks are out, we have to look at what this deck does in comparison to what Pan does. The one really cool thing that Android 13 does that sets it above all the rest of the red decks is the play you can make with SS4 Gogeta Powers Connection and Android 13 Uninvited Guest. So once you have your unison established from turn 2, on turn 3, or rather when your opponent has 3 energy, you want to do this, you're going to go ahead and use the +2 to play Android 13 Uninvited Guest for free. The Unit Absorb plays the Android 13 7-drop on top of this card in active mode, so it doesn't matter that Gogeta Powers Connection plays in rest mode. So all that for 1 energy, you're going to go into Total Annihilator, which is going to be a dual attacking 25k double striker, but it combos a card from underneath itself on swing, essentially making it a 30k and generating you more Z energy. However, there's a neat trick you can do with Android 13 Villainous Threat, where you basically give it triple attack. Let's explain how that works. So with this permanent, if an Android 13 is under this card gains dual attack and isn't affected by red sands. That part doesn't matter. So you swing with this, and then you combo the Android 13 that is under it. That's going to be the uninvited guest, right? So you combo that the dual attack is an auto that's already activated, so it's gonna restand even though while the Android 13 is no longer under this, the permanent no longer applies, but you still restand because dual attack already activated. Then use the activate main of Android 13 Villainous Threat to put itself underneath the Total Annihilator that's still in play, and now your permanent is basically refreshed and you have a new instance of dual attack. I know it's a little bit complicated for anyone who might be newer to Dragon Ball Super, but that's the process in which this thing gains pseudo triple attack. It's basically just gets dual attack twice, but yeah, that's pretty much how it works. Very, very good for a dual attack, double strike, 30k. Now, that's what this deck does for 1 energy. Again, granted, you were able to establish SS4 Gogeta Unison, otherwise it's technically 2 energy. As where compared to Pan, you definitely get a bit more bang for your buck out of Defender of Life, but it costs 1 additional energy. So you're saving an energy in 13, which can be useful for stopping like a Floodgate, for example. So you can have like this whole play set up ready to go, backed up by like a Beerus Ball. So I do think these two red decks, once again, are going to be much more fair than Sin and Gogeta ever were, but I still think they're going to be pretty good. Now let's talk about those players who have lost the ability to play Gamma. Well, I know this might seem quite obvious, but you've got 2 really good Android archetypes to play now that your most loved Android archetype of Gamma is gone. One that's definitely slipping a little bit under the radar is Self-Control Android 21. This deck gets really big boosts from Android 21 trading places. It basically just constantly procs your leader auto to sack energy, replace energy, then draw cards, and it can do that during both players' turns. And on top of that, this deck has the very consistent ability to recycle Android 18 Bionic Blitz, and that is the main means of where you'll be able to conduct your hand control practices, right? So very powerful stuff going on there. And honestly, whenever you're looking at a blue-green deck now, you got to just keep in mind how degenerate this card is. Android 21 Transcendental Predator. Not only does it fully wipe the board, including unisons, but also getting back 1 to 2 life is just ridiculous. This card is... oh man, I don't want to say it, but it's one of the cards that might get an SCR banned in competitive play, or maybe severely errated like Celzino was. This card is absolutely absurd. However, it was a bit more degenerate in Gamma, where you could very consistently go back to 8 life if you were just, floodgating your opponent nonstop, and then you would just sit at 6 life and then go back to 8. This deck can also somewhat do that, but it's not as consistent with the floodgates like Gamma was. So it's definitely a little bit less of a problem. But yeah, this card is absolutely ridiculous. And then the super obvious one is just the Control Android 21 from Power Absorbed. This deck is not going anywhere. However, there are definitely people talking about how this deck might just like become tier 0 in some aspect, because it was one of the best decks in Set 20 format. And now that the 2 aggro decks are hit, this deck can supposedly run free and rampant. I don't see it, because even with the power level of aggro coming down, I still think the aggro decks we will have going into Set 21 will serve as a good check to this deck. But that is in no way to say this is like a bad or unplayable deck. This is going to be one of the best decks in Set 21 for sure. Your aggro matchup becomes a little bit more manageable, might still be a slightly negative matchup. That's where reps and practice are really going to shine and allow you to navigate those bad matchups, because sometimes going second, you might not be able to go for the Z deck ramp play. It just might not be a feasible thing if you've gone second and really need to defend your opponent's onslaught. If you've gone first, maybe that's like a little bit of a different story. But yeah, this is definitely gonna be one of the best decks for blue players to play, especially if you're looking to transition your cards from a Gamma deck like all those blue-green cards to something that's still rather competitive. Now let's talk about green in the competitive landscape. This is my SS2 Gohan deck that I profiled here on the channel last week. I think this list is very, very nice. Main difference you might see in my list compared to others is that I'm choosing to play Cell Max. I'm not playing Goku Peace Resolution. The main reason for that is when that card is expected in a competitive landscape, it just becomes a lot worse, because if your opponent dedicates and negates your leader swing, the card gets way less value. I know so many of you guys are saying, well, why don't I just use it on the next turn? If they just negated my leader swing, they can't negate my leader swing every single turn, right? While that is true, I mean, what if they do negate your leader swing on the next turn? Or what if you lose the game on the next turn because you're sitting with a 2 energy combo card in your hand that you can't really do much with in a green deck that doesn't really manipulate energy all that well? So me personally, I've been liking Celzino more because it's quite unexpected, and if they're just going to constantly negate my leader attack, well, that means my battle cards are generally going to be a bit freer to get in for some more damage. So yeah, this is my list. Again, I profiled on the channel last week. If you want to see my full explanation as well as the beginner's guide, go ahead and check those videos out. Now, of course, for the other green recommendation, I could not just purely recommend a green deck, because none of them are all that good besides Gohan. However, we do have Surge Broly here. The really cool thing about Surge Broly is the abuse of super combos in a very similar fashion to Expert 21, by the way. Maybe that's just like a multicolor thing now. You've got Gogeta Battles Beginning, which allows you to use as a super combo when you have 2 or more Z energy. That's the main way you'll use it in this deck, because the unawakened side of this leader draws when you combo cards. So you make Z energy super efficiently, bringing the super combo online very early. However, you've also got Vegeta Preparing for Battle, which is a rather old promo. Simply discard it, pick up any Gogeta BR from your drop area. That's going to allow you to pick up your super combo over and over and over again, generating more power, generating more draws, and it's overall going to be a really good time. I do think this leader is going to be quite good going into next set. It definitely has some good things going for it. It's got some bad matchups for sure, because it's very hard to generate actual pluses on the unawakened side unless you specifically see your super combo or Chi Motherly Majesty. So sometimes you're jumping through hoops to generate draws that other decks just generate for free. But I do think it's a very efficient deck at making Z energy. You got some cool things in here like Piccolo Jr. Eradicator Peace, very powerful 2-drop card. You've got this 4-drop Gohan, Goku, Goten, Familial Bonds, which punishes your opponent for playing cards during your turn, aka Floodgates. So yeah, very cool thing this leader is going for it. I think it's going to be a decent green option. Probably not as good as Gohan, but that's just my personal opinion anyway. Then we have yellow. So for yellow, there really are 3 decks you could play. That would be Majin Vegeta, Golden Frieza, or Trunks Vegeta. Yellow surprisingly did escape the ban list with absolutely no hindrances. So yeah, all these decks are generally going to stay really good. There are a lot of people talking about the potential for an yellow only meta. I don't really see it happening because blue is still going to be quite good. Like if I was playing any of these yellow decks, which I primarily do play yellow, I'm still going to be, you know, definitely respecting my opponents in the blue matchup, like 21 decks, for example. That deck's very powerful, so I'm never going to count them out as like an auto win matchup or anything. And honestly, that's just the way that I approach Dragon Ball. Whenever I sit across from someone, I always assume that they're on an equal or even higher skill level than I am, just so I can bring my A game, right? And just play the matchup to the best of my ability. Because once you expect your opponent to be like lesser than you, you just start playing sloppy, and then that could lead you throwing the game outright, right? That's just my personal philosophy, I guess. But yeah, these are 2 yellow decks you could definitely play. Trunks Vegeta is also another one. I didn't include it in this video though because it's a bit older, and hey, I'm talking about old decks when we're looking at a set 1 leader, right? But Golden Frieza will never not be fun. That's just the way it is. And then finally, I mean, we've done 2 colors, 2 decks for each color rather. So let's go ahead and talk about black. We have black's reigning champions here. We have Spring Kai of Time, the Chrono Keeper, and we have Cumber. These are 2 black decks that were looked at as the best black decks, but they were just, again, overshadowed by Sin and Gogeta. And you might be wondering, why are they overshadowed by Sin and Gogeta when they're not in the same color pool? Well, black is the other aggro color in the game next to red, and when red had the most overpowered aggro for several sets, of course black was just not going to be as competitively viable, unfortunately. However, with the overall ceiling of aggro coming down, Spring Kai of Time and Cumber can definitely compete in the ring with the likes of Android 13 and Pan, and maybe some other red contenders like U7 Goku, maybe even Powerful and Garlic Jr. coming out in set 21. I know in this video we only talked about 1 set 21 deck, which was Gohan. I did do the tier list last week, going over where I think the set 21 decks place in comparison not only themselves but also to the decks that we know are already going to be established. And while I am very happy about the set 21 ban list, not a lot in set 21 really like power creeps anything else, which is not a terrible thing. Those decks are still worth exploring, worth playing, but they're not going to be like the most competitive things in my personal opinion, except for Gohan representing green. But overall, guys, those are the 10 decks and just like example shells that I wanted to show you guys for strategies you might want to pick up. You know, you have black for aggro, you've got yellow for control mid-range, you've got green for that hand control that we haven't been able to play in such a long time, you've got your blue decks to replace your Gamma strategies, and you've got your red decks to pick up now that Sin and Gogeta are gone. Let me know in the comments below if you have other competitive recommendations. Let me know if you're playing any of these decks. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.